Finally, Simon.
I'm going to stand up, if that's okay.
Yeah, it's fine.
Needless to say, I endorse every word that Glenys spoke on this topic. I need to say that ODI in this debate is non-party and non-political, non-partisan and entirely pragmatic. And we welcome an open debate. But you know what? We want a debate which is based on accurate facts and accurate perceptions and accurate analysis. It doesn't help to produce case studies which make a big thing out of New Caledonia when New Caledonia is not an aid recipient. It doesn't help to produce examples of that kind around the world which don't make the case because they're the wrong ones. I don't think it helps to talk about 1999 as a case study. Some of us were not even MEPs, some of us were at school in 1999, at least some of the people in this room. But there are some important points you've made that I want to pick up on. I think we really welcome the commitment you've made to poverty reduction as a global public good, as a humanitarian necessity, and as a moral endeavour. Not everybody who takes a position on these issues would agree with that. We welcome what you've said about the importance of aid. Your pamphlet is not an attack on aid. It's actually a defence of aid. And you also bring in the important issues about trade and migration policy, which are also central to the development agenda. And you know what? We're winning on those topics. In the last generation, infant mortality has fallen by half. Life expectancy as a result has gone up in many countries by 20 years. There are millions of people now on HIV/AIDS treatment in Africa. There are tens of millions of children in school who would not be in school. And did we do that through aid and trade and migration policy? No, we didn't. People themselves did it and their countries, but we helped. So hang on to that. On the other side of this debate, because this project that we're engaged in, this global endeavour to tackle poverty and injustice and social exclusion, is one that you've endorsed, that we endorsed, and that is central to the debate. There are some things I think you haven't understood about aid, and I need to be blunt about those because I think they'll help us to have a more constructive debate. First of all, to endorse what Glenys said, we face global problems. We can't tackle those on our own in our country. No country is an island. We are making choices. Politicians are making choices about how to deploy their political capital in multilateral institutions. Europe is one of those. We need to make the case not for Europe, yes or no, compared to the UK, but Europe in the context of the UN, the World Bank, and the other multilateral institutions. Frankly, I think you're confused about whether aid is targeted at poor people or poor countries. The fact is that 75% of poor people live in middle-income countries. There is a case for aid to middle-income countries, and so whether or not the EU is targeting all its aid in those countries is slightly beside the point. There are ways we can reach poor people. We can help to demonstrate pilot projects to countries. There are spillover effects to other countries from working in middle-income countries. I don't think you've understood that aid is heavily constrained by the rules of the DAC. You can't spend aid, whether it's in Bosnia or in Burundi or in Bolivia, on anything you like. There are rules about what counts as aid. The European Commission adheres to those rules. You can't spend on the military. You can only spend on the police in certain circumstances. Aid has to be poverty reducing, and European legislation legislates for the poverty focus of European aid. It's important to understand that the UK has an interest in improving the quality of British aid because we acquire leverage. We only provide 10% of European aid, but by spending that money, we like to think we're helping to improve the overall quality of the 60 billion European aid contribution. That means we're influencing the Lithuanians, the Germans, the French, the Italians, working in partnership with them. If we withdrew from that, the average quality would go down. There are things that Europe can do that we can't do. You know, DFID stopped doing power stations half a generation ago. If we want to invest in the basic infrastructure which drives growth in developing countries, we need somebody who knows about roads and bridges and ports and power stations. Those are things that the European Commission is very strong at. You've made a big thing out of admin costs. Well, some of you have worked on budget committees and some of us have followed those things very closely. It's a very difficult trick to pull off to be accurate about admin costs. DFID's admin costs are under pressure. What are they doing? They're reclassifying people from admin to programme and hiding admin costs. Not hiding, but making good use of admin resources in that way. And finally, if we're going to talk about the quality of European aid, this is a good research question, and it's a question that researchers have addressed. The Centre for Global Development and Brookings Institution, represented in the room. 4 dimensions, 30 indicators. The European Commission, well in the top half of all donors. The World Bank, ditto. Bill Easterly, one of the great critics of aid, and colleagues, best and worst practices in European aid. The EC ranking again in the top half. This is not the worst donor. It may not always be in every respect as good as our favourite donor, DFID, but it's a lot better than the average of European donors, and we should celebrate that. So let's quickly look at your recommendations, and I know I haven't got much time, so 2 in particular. First of all, you want to focus on contributions to the EC being voluntary. I've tried to imagine what that might be like. Stephen and Chris. I imagine you standing on a street corner with a briefcase, with a set of projects in folders, stopping passers-by, British taxpayers, others, asking for money, trying to generate interest in particular projects. Or I tried to imagine Andris Piebalgs, the Development Commissioner, going round from capital to capital with a set of projects, trying to find money to do that. I think what we have to understand is that actually our contribution to the European Development Cooperation budget is voluntary. Nobody forces us to sign up to a particular budget settlement. Nobody forces us to make a certain contribution to the EDF, and nobody demands additional contributions on top of those. Those are decisions that are made politically by us at the highest level in the context of a voluntary European project. If we think about the way in which we fund other donors, for example, the IDA, the soft loan window of the World Bank, it's voluntary. What do? We go to Washington, we make 3-year commitments at a certain level to fund that. That's a voluntary contribution in the context of sensible medium-term planning. What do we do in Brussels? Thank you very much, exactly the same thing. Actually, it is voluntary. The only justification for making it even more voluntary would be, I think, that we could, in the context of comparative advantage, think about giving even more to Brussels, and I guess you would not want to do that. You have some other recommendations on budget support that we can come back to. I want to conclude. You've said we should be a critical friend. We agree. This is not ideological, it's not party political, it's about making hard-headed choices in the interest of the world's poor and in the interest of the UK development programme. So I urge you to put aside ideology in this debate, to put aside false analysis, to put aside the mistakes with the facts, but to focus instead on what is the real comparative advantage of EC development cooperation, what we can do multilaterally with our friends in Europe that we can't do bilaterally, how we can combine the support that we give to Europe with the support that we give to the World Bank, the UN and the other international organisations, and then work with us to make it better. Nobody pretends that this is perfect. We're only halfway up the European League table. We'd like to see the Commission at the top. We have an agenda around the financial perspectives, around the allocation of aid, around trade policy, about the capacities of the new joint development cooperation bureaucracy in Brussels. We have an urgent agenda of improvement. That's something that if we lead through the UK, we think we can begin to deliver together, and we celebrate the realistic contribution that David Cameron, Andrew Mitchell and his colleagues are making to this, and William Hay, because it's a cross-party issue that we should make European development cooperation as good as it can possibly be. Thank you.
Well done.